Friday 8 o'clock hour also means we are joined on the phone by Randy Holhut, the Deputy Editor of The Commons, your reader-supported independent news and views source for Windham County, free on stands every Wednesday and online at commonsnews.org. Happy Friday to you, Randy.
Happy Friday, Chris. Good morning, everybody. Hi, Joyce.
Hi, Joyce. Thanks for tuning in from the upstairs area. Wanted to start with Wendy Levy's story on the front page of this week's edition of The Commons, covering the Select Board meeting in the town of Newfane. And they were taking up a measure, a non-binding resolution, essentially, that was passed during town meeting. The language very much in that compassionate cities sort of mode with regards to the town of Newfane declaring its intention to welcome and protect the rights of immigrants and refugees. This became, I don't know how long of a conversation at the Newfane Select Board last week, but certainly, bless you, by the way.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. All right, back to it. This became what seemed to be, according to Wendy's reporting, a longer issue than just, rubber stamping what was already passed by members at town meeting back in March.
Well, since we know that select boards like to talk about things, and they tend to make the mountains out of molehills, and this is exactly what this thing was, is kind of just really innocuous thing that got blown into something a lot bigger, and it just defies logic that a non-binding resolution with a simple declaration, the town of Newfane declares its intention to welcome and protect the rights of immigrants and refugees who are already in or who seek to come to our community and our state. To accomplish this goal, the citizens of Newfane call upon the Select Board to consider the formation of a committee to explore ways to make our community safe for immigrants and refugees.
Shouldn't be any simpler than that, especially after, according to the reports, it was overwhelmingly passed, if not unanimously passed.
It was unanimously passed in town meeting.
In the Newfane town meeting. But it began with this whole conversation about words, right? I mean, in terms of what exactly do we want to say? Welcome and protect? Or what is the other phrase that they were saying?
Yeah, the protect one was what the newest member of the board, Mike Fitzpatrick, was complaining about, because he thought that meant we'll have to spend more money on the state police to protect whatever refugees are coming to Newfane.
Yeah, the projections here from Mike Fitzpatrick, who's one of two, we should say. This was a 3-2 vote on this non-binding resolution to form a committee, saying the idea of protect, they expect you to hire someone to protect them, and then thinking that somehow having this non-binding resolution come into a committee was going to automatically draw 100 or so refugees to the community. I mean, quite a leap in logic there from Mr. Fitzpatrick, in my opinion.
Especially when you consider Newfane isn't exactly a destination for resettlement. Burlington, yeah. Newfane, not so much.
Right. And then you could also make the argument that when you're talking about paying however much money, I guess, about $10,000 in contracts to the state police, if you have those refugees there and they're working, then they're contributing to the tax base, right? They would be paying for that protection. There's that element.
Well, of course, the other striking thing about that meeting was the statement that this was a very unpopular thing around the state.
Right. Right. The idea that even though there was one municipality, Heartland, who did not pass one of these compassionate cities resolutions, but that's in comparison to, I think, 18
municipalities and all that voted to either make their town a sanctuary city or just saying, hey, we support you.
Do you think this exposed more of a political delineation in, select boards? We don't have Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, progressives, or any of those kinds of labels next to it. But do you think people were aware in the town of Newfane the positions of the members of the select board on issues like this before this came to the meeting?
I think this is just more the standard kind of fear of something new that comes along. I mean, towns don't normally wrestle with issues of of immigration and citizenship on a federal level. That's for the federal government to deal with, and that they should be concerned with filling potholes and dog disputes.
Right, yeah. Town business, and what really cracked me up about the back and forth that Wendy, I thought, captured very well at this select board meeting in Newfane was they were basically doing the work of the committee. When you're trying to figure out exactly what you want to say, that would be, okay, let's pass a committee and then have them come back to us. Do we say welcome and protect? Do we say open and accepting? And then they can adopt that. But they're kind of putting the cart before the horse here with this whole conversation that took place at the board meeting.
Well, yeah, and that's the standard leap of logic that boards sometimes make when they're confronted with something that's out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, and that, in a nutshell, is small-town government in communities like Newfane and all across Vermont and New Hampshire, place like that. Fun to pay attention to from afar, probably kind of frustrating to be in the room at times when they get bogged down in some of these things, like a non-binding resolution about just being...
The face palming is quite frequent when you run into something like that.
There is other similar news coming out of the community of Vernon, as well as news about Brattleboro Memorial Hospital and the Windham County Sheriff's Department in this week's edition of The Commons. We'll take up those stories with Randy Holhut, Deputy Editor of The Commons, after the bottom of the hour news break. Stick around. And 46 degrees outside at 21 minutes before the 9 o'clock hour. Green Mountain Boys continuing now. Your host, Chris Lenois, talking with Randy Holhut, Deputy Editor of The Commons. Free on stands every Wednesday, online at commonsnews.org. And if you pick up your printed edition, front and center, top of the fold, front page, a picture by Randy Holhut of one of the Windham County Sheriff's deputies sporting their new body cameras, Randy.
Yes, now you can be live when you're doing that DUI walk.
Constant surveillance, certainly a part of the 21st century. Now, obviously this is with all some of the controversies around law enforcement in different communities across the U.S. There's been a big push to fund body cameras. We don't necessarily have to have these. This is more of a nice to have for somebody like the Windham County Sheriff's Department, I would imagine.
Well, actually, it's becoming more of a necessity to have because it's very useful in prosecutions, like the drunk driving, hypothetical drunk driving case. I said, it's one thing to say, this guy was 3 times over the legal limit. It's another thing to be able to show a video in court to a jury of the guy stumbling through the alphabet and wobbling through the field sobriety test. And since a lot of, like, the state police doesn't have cruiser cams, which seems kind of weird in this day and age, a state police agency wouldn't have that. But video, the mantra today is it's not real unless you have the video, right?
Hey, you're right, and you're right about that protection for the law enforcement. How many videos get out there showing members of law enforcement, unfortunately, doing the wrong procedures out in the field and getting caught. Here's an opportunity for them in cases of dispute to show that they are following the letter and they are justified in the actions that they've taken with a drunk driving stop or whatever the example might be.
Yeah, so it works both ways in terms of protecting the deputies when they're out there, that to have the video evidence that whatever they did during an arrest was by the book, or in trying to form a prosecution when they're doing a traffic stop or in some other instance that they have the video evidence to say, yeah, this actually happened the way we said it.
Now, to the point in Mike Fair's story that accompanies your photo and Sheriff Clark's comment about how this is something that will help boost public trust in addition to improving police work, at some point, I think they're going to have to work a little bit on the policy he describes about when these get used. The cameras won't be on all the time. Clark tells Fair his general guidance is, when in doubt, turn it on. But all too often, the skepticism among the public is, when in doubt, they're turning those cameras off.
Well, we've seen in other departments the habit of those cameras conveniently not being turned on or conveniently malfunctioning
right
during a sensitive period of that. But I think a lot has to do with the department and the leadership, and we know that Sheriff Clark is honest not for the most part.
No. He seems to be accountable. Yeah.
Yeah, he's running a good department, and his team has not been running amok, as far as we know.
Well, and no complaints have been lodged, right? I mean, no
complaints have been lodged.
Right.
There's none of his deputies are facing anything like that.
Right.
And that's it. It works both ways. If someone getting stopped knows that there's going to be a video record of what's happening, or actually, why so many people now are starting to get dashboard cams for their own protection.
Yeah. And there's a fascinating sidebar in this story too about storage of this video that is worth people going and getting a copy of this and reading, because that's just one of those hidden costs you don't think about when you're okay. So we're investing, a few tens of thousands of dollars in these cameras. That'll be good. But then the cost of actually storing this video, processing the video, there's a lot of expenses there in addition to that. Definitely worth people's time to read Mike's story. Now, speaking of getting caught, Randy, another front page story by Mike in the Commons this week having to do with Brattleboro Memorial Hospital and investing a lot in their radiological equipment over the past few years, apparently failing to inform somebody of a diagnosis of a cancerous mass on their kidney, or a possible cancerous mass on their kidney, getting cited by the state for that, and then also getting cited for not necessarily following up on it in a way that the state felt was adequate. I got to say, that second part to me seems really outside of the culture that I know Steve Gordon has instituted there, that lack of a follow-up correction plan. Yeah,
it's everybody's worst nightmare when they go to the hospital that the doctors missed something,
right,
or you don't get told that they found something, or that they found something but they didn't move it up further up the chain. And this is the kind of thing that feeds into the perception that some have about the hospital not being as sharp as it should be on things.
Right. Well, and that's, it's a sad thing to think about, but it's not uncharacteristic for a hospital to miss a diagnosis, right? I mean, it's the medical profession. It's not 100% perfect. It's not, something where these people are going to be flawless all the time. So as awful as it is to think about that they missed informing this patient about this diagnosis, it's the follow-up aspect of it to me that's the really egregious part. The fact that the state felt that they weren't really doing enough to try and correct the problem afterwards. I wonder how much of that has to do with how specific about what they wanted the hospital to do versus they just wanted something done faster.
I think the speed and accuracy were the main concerns of that, because when you're by the time this was revealed, the person had stage 4 cancer. But at that point, it's a little late in the game to say, oh, by the way, you got cancer.
Yeah. And certainly stories like that, considering, again, when you invest in the radiological equipment that the Brattleboro Memorial Hospital has, part of that is because it generates revenue for the hospital. They have, they're trying to be the place that people go for these tests versus some of the other surrounding hospitals in the area that also have imaging services. This is a bad marketing PR situation for them.
It's something that I'm sure the hospital is kind of not happy that's on the front page of the newspapers.
No. And I asked Mike about lawsuit potential from this patient when he was in here on Tuesday, and he said, well, I'm not a lawyer, but I got to think so. But you also have to wonder, what if other people come forward? What if this turns into a class action kind of situation? Is it something that's symptomatic versus something that just happened one time?
Well, the hospital leadership better hope not.
Yeah, and certainly a serious thing. But the state seems to be happy with the plan they've put in place to correct it, and obviously we hope that they do correct that for everybody's sake as far as testing. Firsthand the importance of these testings and detections.
Well, a year ago when I was in there for a very busy Friday, getting a CAT scan and an ultrasound to determine what the heck was going on inside me, they were flawless in their diagnosis, but they were also quick to kick me up to Dartmouth-Hitchcock, too, because they kind of couldn't figure out what was going on with me. And to this day, they still don't know what happened to me.
But at least they detected it quickly and said, let's take some action on it. So they're a good story to balance out. Want to also ask you about the story. It's on the back page of the Town and Village section Vernon having this committee for a few years now looking at fiber optic. And at a time when other communities, I think, would give their eye teeth for broadband, it's fascinating to me to see that Vernon was uninterested. That's basically why they've disbanded this committee looking at a fiber optic network, because not enough interest among the residents and among the businesses. Do you think that's more because it was a community project, in other words, a taxpayer-funded project, or do you think it's just a lack of understanding about the benefits that broadband could have to a community like Vernon?
I think both.
Yeah.
I think that people don't understand what the possibilities of having what's known as gig to the home, or 1 gigabyte of data per second flowing to your computer, or whether it's at home or your business. And I think it's also a recognition of the changing landscape on the federal level. The FCC and the new head of the FCC seems to be rather hostile to the idea of community broadband.
True.
And even though other places in Vermont have kind of thriving community broadband networks, I'm thinking of EC Fiber up in the White River Junction area. It's been really hard around the country to get similar things started, because the cable companies say, no, we don't want that. We want to have the monopoly all to ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly is that element to it. I mean, growing up in Vernon, it took forever for them just to get cable out there, and so it doesn't surprise me that it is a difficult sell to people in that community, and that's why Munson Hicks, the committee chair, ultimately saying we're going to move on from this, but we hope somebody else picks it up. And I was glad in Mike's story they kind of reminded everybody about the process Vernon just went through with the Council on Rural Development, because even though fiber optics is something that could underpin some of the goals that they laid out during that process, like having a community space, it would be great to have nice broadband in a community space. It would draw people to a community space. It was never something they really identified as a priority during that process, and you would think if it really was something that was important, it would have come out at that point.
Well, if you think of what just happened to the library with the cut in the funding, there's one community space that they weren't interested in supporting. Yeah.
The community space means somebody coming in and starting a community or like a general store business, not something that the community is funding. That seems to be the mindset of Vernon right now.
Yes, and that we don't want, our taxes are high enough, and we don't want to spend anything more public money on anything except the pool and the rec area.
Right. Wrapping up this week's conversation with Randy Holhut, as we always like to, as we turn the calendar to the spring sports season. You and I will hopefully see each other out there tomorrow for the season opener for the boys lacrosse team. But you got double duty. The girls play softball as well?
Well, maybe even triple duty because of the big party at the West B Firehouse tomorrow.
Right. Oh, yes, morning. Yes. I'll be at that, so we'll see each other on a couple of different stops here. But we were talking last week about the pitching for the Lady Colonels softball team and who's going to replace Hannah Wilson there. It seems like a kind of almost a pitching by committee start for the Lady Colonels.
Yeah, just seeing what the matchups are. But it seems like Jocelyn Nather is the first among equals on the pitching staff.
Okay, so she'll get the ball tomorrow and get the ball most of the time there, but it didn't seem like they were afraid to go to a reliever. It was Haley DeRosia who came in and relieved there.
Yes, in that particular game. But of course, on the other side, in the baseball, Leaf Bigelow's looking good.
Yeah,
and that was a heck of a game this past a few days ago in Mount Anthony there with O'Neill versus Bigelow.
Yeah,
two top pitchers in the South.
Not a lot of offense when those two were on the mound, but a great start for the Colonel's pitching staff. Hopefully that will continue. We will continue to have our Friday conversations with Randy. We'll put a period on this one now, though. Thanks for your time this morning, Randy.
Okay, have a good weekend.
You too. Once again, Randy Holhut, Deputy Editor of your reader-supported, award-winning independent news and views source for Windham County. Go to their website, commonsnews.org, and become a member. We'll be back to wrap up this edition of the Green Mountain Mornings program right after these messages.